800 DeWitt Law, or you can also interact with the show by sending emails to ask@dewittlaw.com. That's ask@dewittlaw.com, or by calling 407-53-MOSES. You can leave a voicemail right there, and then we'll play it back right here on the radio show every Sunday morning right here at 10 a.m. You'll learn how Florida's legal issues affect you with your host, Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Mo will answer your questions to discuss the latest legal issues affecting the citizens of Central Florida. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt. Hello, Mo. Happy Sunday morning.
Happy Sunday to you, Jay. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Can we dive into a little bit of celebrity trial? I love this stuff.
That's why I show up these days.
What is going on with this whole Gwyneth Paltrow trial?
Well, I mean, first of all, I feel like after the Murdaugh trials, people need something to watch now.
Yeah.
This has kind of created a cottage industry of YouTube trials, so to speak, where people are just entertained by watching these trials. But if you're not familiar with this trial, it's the Gwyneth Paltrow trial. Obviously, she's an actress. And apparently, she was in a ski accident in Deer Valley, which is kind of a very hoity-toity, expensive ski area. I mean, I know you have a chateau there, Jay.
I do. And when you say chateau, that means an empty bottle of wine? Is that what that means?
Sure, we'll go with that. I'm sure you and Gwen, whatever you call her, ski together all the time.
Gigi.
But yeah, so she was on the ski slope, and this other guy who's an ophthalmologist or a retired ophthalmologist now either ran into her or she ran into him.
Something that happens on ski slopes often, right?
Right. And so usually, this does happen all the time, but usually if one person hits another person on a ski slope and there's injuries, you can't sue the ski resort because it's an inherent risk of skiing.
Right. You sign all that paperwork, right?
Right. It's on the back of your ticket. You've waived everything. You can't go after them. And usually there's not insurance that's going to cover these types of collisions.
Right.
In this case, though, Gwyneth Paltrow obviously has money to pay for damage if she actually ran into this person. And I don't know if you've watched this trial at all, but it is a very, very bizarre trial. I think most lawyers out there are pretty good. I don't know where they found these lawyers.
Was it Hollywood casting?
It's straight out of Saturday Night Live casting. I mean, some of the questions they ask, I don't know if they're starstruck by Gwyneth Paltrow or if they're secret fans of Gwyneth Paltrow, but it's just bizarre.
Okay,
it's a bizarre trial to watch.
I've got a little bit of a clip here from the attorney when she's questioning Gwyneth. I'm going to play for you real quick. Here, check this out.
You were wearing goggles, a helmet.
Yes.
Okay, kind of looked like everybody else on the slope.
That's always my intention.
Okay. Probably had a better ski outfit, though, I bet.
I still have the same one.
May I ask how tall you are?
I'm just under 5'10".
Okay. I am so jealous.
I think I'm shrinking, though.
You and me both. I have to wear 4-inch heels just to make it to 5'5".
Well,
so
they're very nice.
Oh, thank you. And you're not trained in accident reconstruction.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Neither am I.
I was yelling at him.
Pretty loud. Pretty forceful.
I was pretty upset.
Right? You're small but mighty. Actually, you're not that small. Okay. And I'm assuming, and you're under oath here, that you're a good tipper.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. I wouldn't expect anything less.
I mean, what is going on?
She sounds like she's totally smitten by Gwyneth Paltrow. Like she's got just a big girl crush.
What does any of this have to do with the accident that occurred on ski slopes?
Maybe somebody dared her. Like, I dare you to work these questions in and you'll win a prize.
I hope so. I mean,
what does tipping have anything to do with the case? Just nothing, I guess.
I
right?
honestly have absolutely no idea. Some of the stuff I could kind of see, the height, maybe that goes to the accident reconstruction. Maybe the outfit goes to whether they could identify her, see her, something like that.
Right. You're dressed in the exact same white outfit that every single person wears on the slopes, the same bib and everything.
Right. But, this other stuff is just very bizarre. And just the way she's acting, frankly, is very bizarre. As I always say, maybe we're missing something. We're not in the inside circle here. But it certainly seems odd, to say the least.
It sounds like we missed mimosas before the case, and somebody had way too many before they started asking questions.
And, a lot of times, after you do a trial, you'll speak to the jury. They're allowed to talk to you if they want to.
Okay.
They have the option not to. You can't force them to speak to you. but a lot of times you'll get feedback from them. And the feedback usually is that they latched onto a little piece of a case that the attorneys didn't even really kind of think about or contemplate.
Okay.
And here I think this is a kind of a prime example of the attorneys are missing the point. They're missing the point of, the real question here is, did the doctor crash into Gwyneth Paltrow, or did Gwyneth Paltrow crash into the doctor?
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one witness who sort of saw the accident, and that's the doctor's best friend.
Right.
So, Gwyneth Paltrow's argument, or what she's saying happened, is that she was skiing. All of a sudden, somebody skied in the back of her and kind of took her down. She didn't know what was going on, rolled on the ground, and that's what happened.
And if that's the case, if that's what happened, I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, isn't it?
Cut and dry, doctor's at fault.
Right.
That's the end.
It's over.
It's over. The doctor's obviously saying that Gwyneth Paltrow skied into him
Mm-hmm.
and caused all these injuries. And they have an accident reconstruction expert who's trying to make it seem like the doctor skied into him. But frankly, we don't really know. And that's what they should be focusing on is, okay, how did the accident occur?
Mm-hmm.
Try to pick apart inconsistencies with her statement versus how the injuries occurred. Now, the problem with the accident reconstruction in this case, from my opinion at least, is that, after they collided, then they rolled on the ground together.
Okay.
Kind of down the hill. You can kind of imagine if you've ever been skiing before. If someone were to smack right in the back of you, you kind of get tangled up with them. You roll down the mountain.
Skis, poles everywhere, yeah.
Right. So to try to do an accident reconstruction, you could get injured anywhere down that roll.
Right.
So, part of their argument is, the doctor had broken ribs, and he couldn't get broken ribs if the accident occurred the way Gwyneth Paltrow says it occurred, which, first of all, with the blunt force, if he just ran right into the back of her, possibly break some ribs that way. But then once you start rolling, of course you can get broken ribs that way.
Absolutely. I tripped in a parking lot, broke a rib.
Right. So I think it's a difficult case for them to make, solely based on the accident reconstruction. So it's probably going to come down to who the jury finds most credible,
right,
when they're telling their side of the story. And frankly, the clips you just heard were from the plaintiff's attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, they are making Gwyneth Paltrow more likable,
right,
by basically flirting with her on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, you have the issue for the jury of kind of overcoming that celebrity influence, but they're almost adding more fuel to the fire by the way they're asking these questions and interacting with her.
Right? Isn't she cute? That type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, oh, you're so tall. I'm so jealous.
And
I love your outfits.
And she played along with it too, so it makes you kind of like her just a little bit more. Like,
I mean, they really should be trying to make her look like an evil, cold person, and that was part of their argument, was that this accident occurred and she skied away, which I guess wasn't entirely true. She was with a couple ski instructors because she had her kids with her, and the ski instructor basically said, "Hey, go over here. I'll handle this."
Right.
But at first they were trying to make her seem, cold and uncaring and so on and so forth. That would be a better strategy than, I love your shoes.
Right. You think?
A little bit.
Oh my gosh. Well, so at a place like this, I mean, I've been skiing at some places that I didn't know if I was going to make it out because it was just all ice, those kinds of places.
You and me both.
So she goes here to this really, really nice place. And I swear that some of these places I've seen cameras on top of poles and on the lifts and everything like that. Is there any type of video evidence where they can just simply, well, there it is?
In this case, unfortunately, it does not sound like there is. Now, I think there was some issue where after the accident, there was an email sent that had a link, and the link was some sort of what are those little cameras? GoPro.
It
was like a GoPro link, but that footage has never been found apparently. But it was either the doctor's friend or daughter, I can't remember which, that sent the link and said something like, "Oh, you're famous" or something like that.
Right.
But the video has never been found to date. They don't know where that is. I assume they weren't able to get any video from the ski resort themselves. I'm sure they do have video cameras out there on certain parts, but a mountain's a big place.
Sure,
to try to put cameras everywhere is basically impossible to really capture that. So there's no real video evidence. There's no real photographic evidence. It's just the one witness who, of course, is biased.
Right. Yeah.
Because he's the doctor's good friend. And there were other people around, but these kind of accidents happen so fast, it's really hard to see them. Nobody really saw it, frankly.
And
you saw more of the aftermath.
Yeah, and you can't tell who anybody is because everybody's got their goggles on. Everybody looks the same and everything. You can't identify anybody.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult. And, the collision happened so quickly, more people probably saw them, tangled up, going down the mountain together, poles and skis probably flying. But the actual, who hit who and how that happened, it happens in a split second where it's really, really tough to tell.
Interesting. All right. So again, another one that you've brought up, and now you've made me want to watch just because I want to see what kind of line of questioning comes next.
Well, it will be interesting to see if they actually get to the point, so to speak. The other frustrating thing is this is a week-long trial. So you have a jury sitting there for a week. And as an attorney, you always want to be cognizant of the jury's time, respecting the jury's time.
Yeah.
So when you start going on these like tangents about shoes and outfits and are you a good tipper and stuff like that, are you losing the jury? Are they kind of saying, why am I here? What is going on? I thought this was an accident case. Why are we talking about this other nonsense, essentially? So, it'd be interesting to see if they kind of turn the corner on that, start focusing on the accident more. Obviously, the doctor's claiming that he has, pretty significant injuries, some traumatic brain injuries, broken ribs, some other stuff. I think he's asking for $300,000.
Was he airlifted? I mean,
I never heard anyone say that he was airlifted. I know Ski Patrol came out.
Traumatic brain injury and broken ribs. I mean, if that all is true, that's some significant damage. How hard did they hit?
Obviously, you can get pretty injured skiing. I mean, we've seen people die before skiing, there's been some famous cases out there that I won't mention, but obviously severe injuries can come from skiing because you can get going pretty good. You can get going pretty fast. And if you're not in control of your skis, of course, you can cause a lot of damage to yourself and other people out there.
True.
So I don't know that it's that uncommon. The real question is, how hard was this hit? Who caused this hit? And ultimately, are there going to be damages awarded by the jury? I mean, that's really what they're going to be looking at here. So, ski cases are kind of unusual, especially in this part of the country.
Yeah.
But, just like from what I said before, usually you can't sue the ski resort unless they did something wrong, like they have a giant piece of metal in the slope or something.
Right. So in your opinion, with this being a week-long case, is this something that maybe the jury and people were thinking, okay, this could probably be wrapped up in 2 days or so? Should it have been?
It depends. I mean, you always want to estimate more time for a trial than you think you're going to need because you don't want to run out of time, obviously.
Right.
That's a bad day. But there has been more of a push in the attorney world to try to be more efficient with witnesses. I guess on the TV shows, they're much more efficient, but in actual court, typically it's a very slow, methodical process when you have a witness on the stand. And the reason for that is you're trying to prove every little element of the case usually. So there has kind of been a shift, especially with medical witnesses, of putting them on the stand, getting the main information out of them that they need to get, instead of going through their entire credentials, for instance, of your entire career for the last 30 years.
Right.
All right, so you're a doctor, correct? You're an orthopedic surgeon, correct? Okay. So based on this is the injury that you saw. This is the surgery.
Gotcha.
Kind of cutting right to the point, because frankly, that background, they know they're a doctor. They know they're an orthopedic surgeon. Do you need to know that they, did a 4-year residency at Emory
GPA,
University and studied at Mount Sinai and did the, and wrote these 4 books? I think some studies show that you kind of lose the jury when you're doing that.
Gotcha. Okay. So you schedule a little bit of extra time just in case, and if you get out early, great. But if not, okay.
Yeah, but you kind of wonder on going back to the Murdaugh trial. I said we weren't going to talk about that anymore, but we will. But they were there for what, 4 or 6 weeks?
Yeah.
And they deliberated for 45 minutes. So to me, they were ready to get out of there.
They knew what was up.
Yeah.
Time to go home, see the family. All right, well, we're going to get to some of your questions, but definitely going to be following along with what happens with this Gwyneth Paltrow trial. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review. If you've got questions, you want to call the office, the number there is 1-800-DeWitt-LAW. You can also check them out online, DeWittLaw.com. And we're going to get to your questions here and some advice from Mo coming up here in just a few minutes. If you do have a question, feel free to send it to us at ask@DeWittLaw.com. You can also call and leave that voicemail, 407-53-MOSES. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk.
if you follow me for a while now, you know that I'm always posting stupid videos on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that. But what allows me to be able to do that and what allows me to be on vacation right now is the amazing team that's behind me who's fighting for our clients in court every day. So just because you see me out here on vacation doesn't mean that we're not in the courtroom right now fighting hard. It's just not me, it's the team that's behind me.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Getting to your questions here in just a moment. If you do have a question, you need some legal advice, feel free to send an email to ask@dewittlaw.com. That's ask@dewittlaw.com. Or you can also call and leave a voicemail 407-53-MOSES. And if it's something that maybe you don't want to talk necessarily here on the radio show about, but you do need some legal advice and you'd like to talk to Mo and his team, the number into the office is 1-800-DeWitt-LAW, 1-800-DeWitt-LAW, or you can also go online, dewittlaw.com. We were just talking about the Gwyneth Paltrow trial, and Mo, I had a question because you were talking about when you go skiing, you necessarily can't sue the lodge, the ski place, because you kind of sign your life away, and we all wear those lift passes with all the small fine print on the back. But it made me wonder, like going to, say, a sporting event like a hockey game, right? Mm-hmm. And I've only been to a handful, but when I've been, pucks, they'll go over the ice, and like I've seen pucks hit the border separating the lower bowl and the upper bowl, and they'll put a dent in it, they'll put a hole in it. So I always wonder, what happens if that were to hit a fan? Is the player responsible? Is the league responsible? The venue?
Well, it kind of depends, the exact fact pattern of what happened, right? Mm-hmm. So on one side, there's an argument that there's an inherent risk in attending a certain type of event. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a basketball player diving into the crowd, if you're courtside or something like that,
right,
getting hit with a basketball, getting hit with a foul ball from baseball. But then there's also, certain safety precautions that venues take depending on the sporting events.
Right,
in hockey, you have the glass. In NASCAR, you have, the cages mm-hmm. kind of around the track there. And so if the safety measure fails, then there's an argument that, whoever put that in or installed that either wasn't properly maintaining it or wasn't strong enough to withhold kind of the normal, types of things that would hit it, essentially.
Sure. Right.
Again, depending on the event, the venue, what type of game or sport or whatever it is.
Okay.
So it really depends on the individual facts. And I think, there was a case over at the track in Daytona where a car kind of flipped into the crowd. I think some people were seriously injured and killed, and I know there were some lawsuits because the safety measures that were there did not withhold the accident that occurred.
Gotcha.
And obviously, when you're that close to a racetrack, that can be an issue. And I think they went back in and they kind of made those safety cages a lot stronger and put them in more places and things like that. I think there might have been one at the Monster Jam too, or like a Monster mm-hmm. truck show
right.
that something similar happened.
Because you have a presumed safety, if I bought front row tickets or something like that, you're assuming that whatever is in front of you is hopefully going to protect you in the event that something were to happen.
Right. I mean, when you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, which I think most of us probably are a consumer to some of these types of events, mm-hmm. If you're taking your kid out to the monster truck show, you don't expect a monster truck to come into the crowd and crush you.
Sure.
I mean, that's just, you expect it to be a safe show. If you go to I guess the circus doesn't have animals anymore, but or maybe it doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know. But maybe dating myself here. But if you go to the circus, you don't expect the tiger to run out of the crowd and eat you.
Sure,
there's certain safety precautions that you expect to be in place to protect you and your family. Obviously, if you go to a baseball game, you kind of know, hey, a foul ball may fly over here. I need to pay attention.
Right, yeah.
So, that's kind of – so basically, yes, there could be a case there depending on the actual factual scenario of what occurs.
Okay, so if there's like some negligence, but the guy shoots and it ricochets off a guy's, stick and it just happens to fly crazily in the air, like what are you going to do about that? Just be paying attention, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had some – you say shoot. I know you're not talking this way, but we've had a case before where a guy was at a shooting range, doing practice shooting.
Right.
And, it happens rarely, but sometimes if you hit a certain part of the target, kind of the part of the top where it hangs,
Right.
the bullet can ricochet, and part of the bullet ricocheted back and hit him. I guess it was a different gun. It was someone else on the range. Ricocheted back and hit him in the arm.
Wow.
And he was okay, but he has a piece of bullet in his arm
Sure.
for the rest of his life, essentially. But there, and they have you sign all sorts of waivers saying this when you go in there. That is an inherent risk of going into the gun range, and it actually happens more frequently than you would think.
Wow.
But it's just something, there's nothing you can really do to prevent it.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, if you're going to go in there,
You got to assume
you
something
got to assume
could
it
happen.
could possibly happen. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. I promise I won't ask any more questions. We'll get to your questions coming up next. If you do have one, send it to us at ask@DeWittLaw.com. We'll get it right here during the show. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review, 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. We'll be back with your questions and Mo's advice.
There you go, Crystal. $200 gift card. Congratulations.
Can I give you a hug?
Of course, yeah.
I hear you on the News Junkie all
Oh,
the time.
thank you. I'm glad you came out.
Me too.
Thank you, Mom.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. Every Sunday morning, you'll learn how Florida's legal issues affect you with your host, Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm. And if you've got those questions, we're about to get to them now. You can send them if you need some advice. Ask@DeWittLaw.com, or you can also call and leave a voicemail, and then we'll play it back over the air, 407-53-MOSES. And just know at any time, if you need some legal advice, you can always go to DeWittLaw.com or give the office a call anytime, 1-800-DeWitt-LAW. All right, so let's get to some questions and some advice from Mo here. Let's start off with this one, Mo. I am one of 4 beneficiaries in a trust which includes a townhouse. The property was rented prior to my mom's passing. What is my liability if anything happens at the property?
So, you want to make sure the property is obviously properly insured, and typically you want to have that property in either an LLC or a trust, depending on the situation. Make sure that's set up properly. So I don't know if the trust that you have it set up in was for asset protection purposes, or if that was just from the estate, essentially. So you want to check that first. But typically, if it is in a trust or an LLC, typically your maximum liability would essentially be they could come out after the property. If there was, if you got into a really bad lawsuit, something really bad happened, that you were found to be negligent for some reason, you could essentially lose the property. It's kind of the worst case scenario there.
Right.
Since you don't personally own it, they can't come after you personally. And so that's part of that insulation there. Now, if you are renting it, though, you want to check your insurance policy and make sure that they know it's a rental property. This is where a lot of people get in trouble is, especially with the Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rental thing, they're renting out properties that have, normal residential insurance on them. So something happens, and then the insurance company says, just like if you're, it used to happen more, but now Uber provides insurance. But if you were driving Uber, your normal car policy will not cover you. You have to have a separate policy for that.
Gotcha.
So same thing would happen here. There would be an accident on the property, and they'd say, oh, wait a second, this is a rental property? We don't cover rentals. You need a completely different policy for that. This is just a homeowner's insurance policy, assuming that you lived in the home.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you have the proper insurance on it if you're renting it out that way.
Okay.
Now, again, if you do own rental properties, you certainly want to consult with an attorney and make sure that they're set up properly, either in an LLC or a trust, to make sure you're providing as much insulation as possible in case something does happen. Of course, make sure the property is maintained so it doesn't, but have the insurance and have it set up properly in case something ever does.
Just to be safe.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Next question is, hey, Mo, I live on a narrow street in old historic Sanford area, and a lot of times the streets are lined with landscaping trucks, delivery trucks, that type of thing, and some are on blind corners. If I were to be passing one of these and going into the other lane on my way out to pick up my kids or going to work, and another car was coming, and we were to, collide with each other, who would be responsible for that? The person parking on the side of the the road, or me since I'm going into the other lane of traffic?
So usually, and obviously you have to follow the rules of the road, but usually if you're going into the other lane, the other side of traffic, essentially, you have a duty to make sure that's clear and proceed with caution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, if you're proceeding with caution, it's a blind corner, and the car is legally parked, if there's nothing illegal about parking there, and the other guy is speeding around the corner and collides with you, well, there could be some argument that there's fault on the other side there. Sometimes it's not a clear-cut situation of one person's 100% at fault. Sometimes fault is on a percentage basis, and this law just got changed in Florida. We can talk about that later. But, historically, you could assign, okay, you went into the other lane and went around the blind corner, so you're 30% at fault, but the other guy was speeding and smashed into the front of you, so he's 70% at fault. And, of course, I'm just kind of making things up here. So, people always say, well, who's at fault? Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes there's a percentage assigned to that fault because maybe both people did something that was a little dangerous for some reason. Now, the other situation, obviously, is that these people are parking somewhere that's creating a hazard, that's creating a danger. And so maybe those areas do need to be designated as no parking zones for that reason. Or maybe they are illegally parking because they're too close to a stop sign or something along those lines. So that may be something to look into or possibly bring up to your local council person and say, hey, this is creating a dangerous hazard. It's going on an ongoing basis. We really need this to be designated no parking area to prevent future damages or injuries.
Because I think we've all seen at some point, like you're trying to get out and somebody's blocked you in because they're making a delivery, or literally they stop right in the middle of the road. It's like, well, I can't get around either side right now. It's like, come on, man. Think about other people coming. So, yeah, I guess, all right. So I guess a case-by-case, situation,
Yeah, it really is. I mean, those cases are so factually specific that you really have to look at the individual facts of who did what wrong or if anybody did anything wrong, frankly.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, I know it can just be tough sometimes. Yeah.
All right. Next question comes to us from Terry. I recently got married 9 months ago here in Florida, and it's not working out. I came into the marriage with $250,000, and he came into the marriage with $40,000. My question is, can my husband sue me for $250,000 and get half of it?
So, typical lawyer answer, it depends. Assuming that you both came into the marriage with this amount and you both kept it in separate bank accounts, did not put the other party's name on that bank account, then those would be premarital funds. Where people get in trouble is they come into the marriage with money and then they say, oh, we'll take this money and we'll buy a house and put the house in both of our names. Well, now you've just gifted that money to the marriage, essentially. So that's where people get into a little bit of trouble. But assuming that you actually kept it separate, you kept it completely separate, then they could not sue you for half of it. It was not acquired. So the whole purpose of why things are split equally as far as what you acquire during the marriage is that it was marital efforts. Whether one person did it, whether one person did it or both people did it.
Right.
It was efforts that were done during the marriage that acquired these funds or acquired these assets or acquired this property. And so that's kind of the thought process behind why it should be split equally, whether you agree with it or not. That's just
like the whole teamwork thing.
Right, exactly.
Look what we built over these years.
Exactly. So obviously when you come into a marriage with money, that money was not acquired during the marriage. There was no teamwork that collaborated on that generated that money. So it's non-marital funds. The only way to change the nature of those funds is when you either knowingly or accidentally essentially gift it to the marriage by putting the other name's spouse on that bank account, buying something in both names, or something along those lines. The safest way to protect against that, of course, is a prenuptial agreement.
Right. Okay.
And basically, you can really spell that out as far as what you intend to happen. Now, if you're super safe, maybe you don't need one, but, it's always safest to have one if you're coming into a marriage with significant assets or assets that you want to protect.
Can't hurt if you want to protect it. I'm thinking that's a $250,000. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, for what a prenup costs, it's really not that expensive if you're trying to protect $250,000 or anything similar to that, frankly. And at least theoretically, it should make any divorce, if hopefully you never get divorced, but if you do, it should make that process a lot smoother because you've essentially negotiated the terms or a lot of the terms of the divorce ahead of time.
Right.
You can't do things like parenting plans and child issues in a prenuptial agreement. but you can negotiate a lot of the money stuff there.
So this, I mean, that basically just protects people from, the typical gold digger. Is that basically what it is? I came in, I married you, I knew you were a millionaire. You said yes, I said yes, we got married. Tomorrow I'm divorcing you. Give me half.
Well, beyond that, when people get divorced, a lot of times they're bitter, right? So you just start arguing over things that really maybe don't even make sense to argue over.
I never liked the boat to begin with, but now I want it just because you like it.
Right.
That type of thing.
Yeah. Or, I want the bedroom furniture because, I know you have to go buy new bedroom furniture if I get it. That
Gotcha.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where the amount you're going to spend on attorney's fees, you could both buy new bedroom furniture, but nobody ever pays attention to me on that. So, I mean, and it goes far beyond that. Sometimes there are obviously legitimate issues, but, when people are on good terms, it's much easier to negotiate those issues ahead of time in the event a divorce ever comes down the road.
Gotcha. Very good. All right. So I'm going to ask you this question, and it's probably a tough answer because there's probably a lot of answer to it, but I figure we got about 5 minutes here. And so person wants to know, hello, I'm a father, and I'm just trying to figure out my rights.
Well, we might need another hour show on that. So, first of all, it depends if you were married or not.
Okay.
So let's assume that to begin with, let's assume that you have a child and you're not married.
Mm-hmm.
So in the state of Florida, if you have a child with somebody and you're not married, you need to file a paternity action to establish your rights. Because as a father, if you're not married, you have no legal rights to that child until a court adjudicates you as the father. It does not matter if you're on the birth certificate or not. That's where a lot of people get confused. You have to actually file with the court and have yourself adjudicated to be the father. Now, from there, as part of that paternity action, they can also do a parenting plan if you guys live separately, where, just like in a divorce, who has custody or time sharing, as we call it now in Florida, and child support as well. Basically, all the issues related to the child is kind of contained within the parenting plan.
Okay.
But like I said, if you're not married until you file that action, you have no legal rights because the court has to adjudicate you as the father.
Okay, so step one.
Step one. Now, assuming that you're married and you have a child together, there's a presumption that you're the father. And that gets complicated sometimes where people have children outside the marriage, and that's a whole nother situation. But there is a presumption that you are the father. So there you do have legal rights. And if you're going through a divorce, basically you have the same rights to the child that the mother has. I always say the days of kind of, dad automatically gets every other weekend are sort of out the window. I don't really see many judges or any judges, frankly, doing that anymore. In Florida, the statute basically says that they want to do what's in the best interest of the child. And most judges believe having as much contact with both parents, unless there's a reason for them not to, is what's in the best interest of the child. And when I say unless there's a reason not to, usually that means some sort of substance abuse, physical abuse,
right,
mental health issues.
Can't take care of them or doesn't want to take care of them, that type of thing.
Right. Things that are pretty significant.
Okay.
Dad wants to feed the child peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I think he should have, organic chicken sandwiches is not a reason to withhold
right,
custody or time sharing from.
Kids probably going, please give me PB&J.
Right. And you do get into the situation of, in these cases, sometimes I always say the child's going to go with whichever parent gives them the most candy, right? Especially at a certain age. So you want to try to avoid, first of all, the child should never be in the middle of any case like this. They should really not even know what's going on. But you do see situations where one parent kind of starts to bribe the child to try to get them to come to their side when really that's not the healthiest thing to do. And that's why most courts will not consider the opinion of a child. In most cases, there is a very limited circumstance where they'll allow a child to testify. And it's not really testimony. They go back and the judge basically talks to them with a court reporter there.
Dad makes me do homework and practice piano. Mom takes me to the theme parks every weekend.
Right.
I could totally see that. Where do you want to go? Mom.
Right, exactly. That's why they don't let the child decide.
Yeah.
For that very reason right there. So anyways, if you are getting a divorce, your rights are, and you were married, and you have children together, obviously your rights are basically the same as the mother. You both have equal rights to the child. It's just a matter of going through the divorce process, getting a parenting plan that works for both parties. If you can't agree on one, the judge will come up with one for you, and then you're obligated to abide by it.
Gotcha. And speaking of going through a divorce, I know you've got your book out there. If somebody is contemplating going, filing for a divorce, or they're going through it and they need some help right now, how can they get their hands on your book? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so you can go to DeWittDivorce.com. You can download a free copy there. It's also on Amazon, and I think we're on Audible now too if you want to download the audio version of it. But basically, it's kind of a beginner's guide to divorce, so to speak. Divorce for dummies. Not that I'm calling you a dummy, but it's a very introductory level, kind of walking you through the divorce process. Because, I think one of the scariest parts of a divorce is not knowing what to expect or how it works. So this is not a book that is meant for attorneys. It's meant for you guys. It's meant to kind of guide you through the process, show you the steps of the process. If you have children, this is how it's going to go. This is what you need to do. This is the documentation and information that you're going to need to gather as part of the divorce. So it's going to walk you through step by step, how a divorce works, some of the pitfalls of divorces, things to avoid doing, common misconceptions, and just a lot of frequently asked questions. So it's out there. It's free for you guys. Just go to DeWittDivorce.com. You can download a copy there. It's also on Amazon and Audible and probably some other places that I don't even know.
Perfect. Very helpful if you or somebody that you know is going through or thinking about going through a divorce. So, all right, well, we'll be back with more questions and advice coming up in just a minute, plus our Mo Pro Tip of the week. If you have a question, send it to us, ask@DeWittLaw.com, or by calling 407-53-MOSES. Leave a voicemail right there. Also go online anytime if you'd like to reach Mo and his team, DeWittLaw.com. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk.
So I got a call from a guy last night who was in a pretty bad car accident. He was behind a work truck, essentially. Some items fell off the work truck, went through his windshield, smashed up his windshield, and hurt his hand really bad. So the insurance company reached out to him right after the accident, and he was at first concerned about getting his windshield fixed. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but his hand was all banged up and really needed to see a doctor about his hand, especially because he does construction work and that's kind of his livelihood. But he was concerned about getting his car fixed, getting it back on the road so he could start driving. So the insurance company sent him some paperwork, and he signed it. And the problem is that paperwork was a release. So basically, he released the at-fault party from any and all liability for a little over $400, basically, which means he can never go after them again. So he called us to see if we can help them. Unfortunately, in this case, we can't help him. He released the other side completely, and frankly, there's nothing we can do. And that's why it's always so important that you speak to an attorney before you ever sign any paperwork with the insurance company. Worst case scenario is the attorney's gonna say, yep, you're good to sign it, good to go. Worst case, or best case scenario, it'll save you from something like this. So before you ever sign a release, before you ever sign any paperwork with the insurance company, reach out to an injury attorney. Most injury attorneys won't charge you a dime to talk to you and take a look at that and try to help you with it. Unfortunately for this individual, it's a little too late, but hopefully somebody else out there can learn from his story and hopefully avoid making the same mistake he did.
Welcome back to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's News and Talk. My name is Jay Edwards here with Mo DeWitt of the DeWitt Law Firm, getting your questions and Mo giving you advice. If you have a question, send it to ask@DeWittLaw.com. That's ask@DeWittLaw.com. Or also you can call the DeWitt Law Firm anytime. That number, 1-800-DeWitt-Law. We've got our Mo Pro Tip of the Week coming up in just a couple minutes, but let's go ahead and get to a couple quick questions. Mo, can I say I'm going into bankruptcy during a judgment?
Well, you can say whatever you want. You'd have to actually file for bankruptcy during the case. And
not going to help you.
You can't just scream down the hall, I declare bankruptcy. You have to actually file the bankruptcy. Then there's a suggestion of bankruptcy that's filed in any ongoing lawsuit. And typically that's going to stay the case. So it's going to automatically stop whatever is going on in that lawsuit or in that case. Those claims may be brought into the bankruptcy case, depending on what type of claims they are. And then those creditors, if there are creditors, may ultimately be paid from the bankruptcy estate. Again, depending on what type of bankruptcy, we're talking very generally here. So, back in, 2010 or so, there used to be, when everybody was in foreclosure, there's all these foreclosures. You would see a lot of times people, they go through the whole foreclosure process. Then right before the house is about to be sold, they would file bankruptcy because that would stop the sale.
Gotcha.
Now, after you do that a few times, the bankruptcy court says you can't file bankruptcy for 7 years or something like that, to kind of stop people from just continuously doing that. But the bankruptcy court is there for obvious protections, and basically the idea behind it is that if you have a lawsuit going on, that you have a judgment that's against you or about to be against you, you can kind of consolidate everything through the bankruptcy court and use whatever assets you have to pay it out and kind of take care of everything. Because obviously we got rid of debtor's prison a long time ago. So, you can only get so much from one person.
So just before the judge announces that you're getting sued and you lost and you're going to have to owe $1 million to somebody, you can't holler out, well, fine, I'll declare bankruptcy. Too late.
Yeah, I mean, and you can do that, but then they're going to look at all the assets you have, and they're going to, allocate those assets to your various creditors based on how much they're owed and the priority of the creditor under the statute, essentially.
So nice try, pal. All right, let's get to our Mo Pro tip of the week. What do you have this week for us, Mo?
So it's more of something that we've kind of talked about a little bit, and it's these insurance reform or tort reform bills that have been going through the state legislature, and they were passed very quickly. The most recent one was one that affects basically everyone in the state of Florida. We talked, kind of back up a little bit, we talked about the property insurance one. And, obviously there's been a lot of property claims, these free roofing claims in Florida. And finally the legislature did something about that and, issued some reform there. And as we've said on the show many times, we needed some of that reform. Right. I don't fully agree with the way the statute was written. And I wish they would have included a provision in there that either guaranteed rates would stay the same or go down over time or something along those lines. Instead, they basically gave the insurance company everything they wanted. So now it's going to be much harder to make a property insurance claim in the state of Florida. And, I've said this many times on the show too, my rates tripled. So I'm a little bitter about that. So hopefully those rates over time will come down. Unfortunately, the only way my insurance rates across the board have ever gone down is if I switch companies. This whole notion that, if we pass these laws, the insurance company is going to pass the savings on to the consumer, I've just never seen it, frankly. I mean, the only way I've ever gotten my rates to go down is by switching companies. But anyways, now they've basically taken what they have done with property insurance and applied it to injury cases in the state of Florida. And at first, they billed this as the small business bill to help save small businesses because it's going to reduce your insurance rates.
Okay.
It won't, but,
Nice try.
Yeah. Then they said it was the anti-billboard attorney bill, which, look, I get the billboards all around town. They're obnoxious, but really, it doesn't hurt the billboard attorneys.
Right.
They're not going to go away. The people that's going to hurt is the people of the state of Florida. Former President Trump called this the biggest insurance bailout in history. And he's right to some degree, but I disagree that it's a bailout because a bailout is one time. This is permanent. So basically the insurance that you pay for now on your car, on your vehicle, has become much less valuable. So if you're in an accident, if you're hurt, and nobody ever cares about this until it happens to them. I think that's why it's so easy to get these laws passed is you don't really think about it. Oh, that's not going to happen to me.
Right.
I'm a safe driver. It's not going to happen to me. But then when you go and you need it, and you go, wait a second, I'm not one of these frivolous lawsuits. Every case that the insurance company has to pay money out on, they consider frivolous.
Right.
And maybe I'm being a little overly cynical here, but I've seen it too many times to be honest with you. So, now basically in the state of Florida, if you're in an accident and you go and see a doctor, when you go after the person who caused the accident, you ask for your medical bills to be paid. Those medical bills are now tied to the Medicare and Medicaid fee schedule. So even if your doctor, through your health insurance charged $60,000 for a surgery, if Medicaid or Medicare only paid $10,000 for that same surgery, that's all you're entitled to recover is based on the fee schedule.
Gotcha.
It's slightly higher because there's some percentage adjustments, but it doesn't matter if you qualify for Medicaid or Medicare. Your bills are now tied to that, which I think there's going to be some challenges to because I don't know how you can tie someone's medical bills to a program that they don't qualify for. So I suspect somebody's going to challenge this and basically say, number one, either you have to open up Medicaid to everybody who's in a car accident if you're going to tie their bills to it, or you have to wipe out this provision, which would probably be the latter. But to me, I mean, if you've ever known somebody who has Medicaid or Medicare without the supplements and all that kind of stuff, especially for surgeons, for surgery, complicated surgeries, it's very hard to find people who are willing to do it based on that pricing. I had a friend who I think needed elbow surgery, and they had to go up to Ocala because they were on Medicaid at the time. That was the only person who would do it, essentially. Wow. So there's going to be a lot of litigation over this stuff. There's going to be a lot of challenges. But, it's disappointing. Again, there was no provision here to ensure that prices were going to go down, rates were going to go down for the consumer. It really took us from being a state that had fairly good consumer protection laws when it came to injuries to being literally the worst state in the nation.
Right.
If you're going to get injured in a different state. You don't want to get injured in the state of Florida.
There's the Mo Pro tip of the week.
That's the Mo Pro tip of the week. So, and they're doing other insurance reforms now. They're attacking the windshield claims and all this other stuff. They're really stripping the rights of the citizens of the state of Florida out there from these insurance companies and handing them whatever they want. And I don't like this to be a political show because I try to stay focused on what the law is, but frankly, the law has just changed so dramatically that is what is happening here. And whether you agree with what's going on in the legislature or not, look at how it would affect you if you had a claim and how you would have to pursue it, right?
Gotcha.
And either way, if you're going to strip away our rights to some degree, at least pass along the savings. I hate the argument that the market will automatically pass them because it's literally never happened in the course of history with insurance companies.
Not unless you switch companies.
Unless you, and that's, that's playing the market against each other, right? It's, you go out and reshop and you can find a cheaper quote. But so we'll keep you updated on that. It was moved very quickly. And actually I don't know if we have much time left.
Oh, we're 4 minutes over.
All right, perfect. But in response to this, there was 90,000 lawsuits in the state of Florida filed last week by attorneys because essentially they had to file every case in the court to prevent it from being under this new statute.
Wow. So
now that there's 90,000 lawsuits that were filed, the defense bar, the attorneys who represent the insurance companies, wrote a letter to the Florida Supreme Court and asked for an emergency order to be issued, giving them more time to respond to all these cases. Which in my mind, I'm going, well, you could have had the law start January 1. You had it start immediately and apply to all accidents that have already happened. It has a retroactive element to it. So what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
You set this up. You're the one who wrote the bill. You designed the bill. You asked for it. Maybe you should have thought about those consequences beforehand. Yeah. So, because obviously they wanted to go into effect right away because they wanted to save money on those claims. Now that all these claims got filed, they're not happy about it.
Nope.
So,
all right. Well, we'll follow along with this. It's your Mo Pro tip of the week. We'll be back again next week. You are listening to the DeWitt Law Review on 107.3 FM and AM